the sitcom could be argued is always about family. In which to say, it's doesn't mean the characters are necessarily related by blood, but rather by location where they live, where they go to school, who they live with, and the groups of friends around them. This is from Lewis Lowry Lavery, Literacy Through Laughter, How to Teach a Sitcom-Based Unit, published in 2018. She's an Australian educator. We love to model, or to see models when we're growing up as children. I still like to model my father, and certainly when I was 5, I wanted to be like my father. TV is another way that children are able to see what it's like to be an adult or to grow up. Post-war sitcoms focused on small family groups. This later shifted into being able to choose who your family was, which again later switched to accidental families. Let's start the conversation about 2 classic black and white TV shows that do show us what it's like to live in a small family unit in the United States. Let's start talking about I Love Lucy and The Andy Griffith Show. TV at this time defined family as a biological group that lived very, very close to each other. Sitcom emerging at the tail end of the 1940s, alongside the television itself, bore witness to and accepted the horrors of World War II. Mirrored America, not necessarily as it was, but as it should be, peaceable, middle class, eternally unchanging. Saul Austerlitz, the sitcom history in 24 episodes from I Love Lucy to Community in 2014. I Love Lucy talked about these things through comedy. She was married to Ricky Ricardo, later had a son also named Ricky, and she was able to she was able to depict American life in the comedy and the small group around her. We also see that in the Andy Griffith Show, where we see Andy, Aunt Bee, Opie, and little Barney Fife interactions in small town USA, being able to draw people back to the small town, to a simpler life before war. They focused on what it was like to be an American before watching the horrors of war. Understanding this, we can now see how the late 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s pushed back on this idea. From a time where biological meant family to a time where you were able to pick your family. And these are ideas very prevalent in that 70s show and as well in Friends. We see it in Friends because 6 friends moved to New York City, and we don't really see their family that often. They spend holidays with each other, and we see them valuing each other rather than the people that they came from. We see that in that 70s show that these also 6 friends spent more time together and bonded together more than they did with their actual families. They were trying to push back on what a family was. We see that from an Argentinian Chilean boy who doesn't even have a family. He just lives with one of the characters. We see that also in a couple more characters in the show. Leaving New York City to eventually come back to it 20 years later, to where a time where family was defined as accidental. The third phase of the family story arc is something called accidental family. People that impact your life, people you spend the most time with. If any of you have worked a 40-hour work week, you know what I'm talking about. 40 hours in your week is about a third of the time that you have. That means the people you spend the most time with, or one of the most time with, are the strangers that you work with. And you don't really have a choice about who you work with or go to school with. We see that in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Office, Community, and Parks and Rec. Every office has its Pam and Jim. While no one ever owns up to being the show's Michael, inevitably there's one of those two. The sitcom, therefore, can be an unlikely vehicle for the development of self-awareness and self-acceptance. Viewers observe and identify particular aspects of their own flawed nature in the on-screen characters, a nature platable by the humor and sheen in which they are delivered. Jake Martin, Why Sitcoms Matter. This is why a lot of us chose these as our favorite shows. We're able to identify with the characters we see. We're able to emulate and to look to them, and maybe something how not to do it, or maybe in some cases how to do it. We see in these shows that even Ron Swanson grows to care for the people around him. We see that in The Office as well. Even though Michael has a strange way of showing it, he generally cares for the people that work for him. This is something that I think TV shows have gotten right in this decade. from a time where Christians tended to criticize Hollywood for maybe promoting wrong ideas or ideas that we disagree with. They certainly have an idea here that I really like, the idea that we are called to love the people around us. To conclude, TV shows shape how we define family and is best seen looking at the past and coming forward. When sitcoms started, they started as a biological focus, later to being able to choose who our family are, and later to this accidental phase.